We sent it out, just one mail shot, it instantaneously got 97 respondents. That's a lot. The good news is that by and large, both sides, marketers and public affairs, want to see more interaction. So 87% of policy people said we want to see more interaction with marketers. 68% of marketers agreed. Critically, and I think this is probably one of the most important statistics and probably a good reason why we should continue this research in the future, is that 9 out of 10 marketers say that it's going to be increasingly important to work with their public affairs teams in the future. So good news there. That said, the status quo today is not quite so rosy. There's a sense, particularly from policy executives, that 65% are saying that there's too little interaction today. Not quite so strong on the marketing side, but still 43% feel that there's too little interaction. In terms of feeling misunderstood, does the other side, the other function, get my agenda? 54% of marketers felt that policy people didn't quite understand the challenges that they're facing. Even more so on the policy side, and I guess a lot of the policy people can probably empathise with this, 76% of policy people said marketers don't understand the priorities or the challenges that I'm up against. When we said how useful policy input is from marketers, on the right-hand side, 85% of marketers are saying policy input is helpful, welcome, or essential, which is good. But only 17% saying it is essential. I guess over time what we'd like to be able to see is that a larger sway towards the right there in terms of essential. And where do they see policy teams as being helpful? I guess this is intuitive for a lot of us as policy people and to marketers as well, is that it's the regulatory firefighting. They effectively protect our license to operate. So 65% of marketers can think of a time when the policy team helped avoid press or regulatory scrutiny. A word of warning, however, when we went through the results, 28% of marketers, and more concerningly, 29% of policy people feel the policy agenda is not relevant to marketers. We asked ourselves, at what point did they not wonder why they were filling in this piece of research? This jumped out. I mean, you could see this in two different ways. It's a relatively small figure, however, we consider it to be a significant minority. Okay? Now, I don't think this would probably be the case for many of the companies in the room, particularly in so-called under-fire sectors. I remind you that there were 50 companies who filled in this, and a lot of companies, emerging brands from different parts of the world, where perhaps they're not such natural bedfellows where you'd imagine policy and marketing to work together. But we did consider this to be a significant minority. So how do the functions describe each other? Now, we tapped into the poetry of one particular marketer who defined the relationship as lawyers versus dreamers. The same person said, the challenge is the same as men are from Mars and women are from Venus. What do you think most marketers describe themselves as? So this is how marketers thought policy colleagues would describe them. Yes, business focus would be number one. Number two, risk takers, boundary pushers, creative, 53%. Most consider in touch with consumer sentiment, forward thinking, less so strategic planners, and not out of touch with people, fortunately. The actual responses from policy people. So this is exactly how policy people really considered marketers in terms of the adjectives we put out there. They agreed. By and large, business-focused. They agreed. They consider the marketers to be, by and large, creative people, in touch with consumer sentiment. But one disparity was short-termist. Okay, which we kind of found strange, and that marketers were saying they considered that policy people would describe them as short-termists, but in reality not so much. And that didn't actually reflect the conversations that we hear very often at WFA, where sometimes we get the sense there's a sense of impatience and sometimes frustration amongst policy people that marketers looking at the short term. Also, risk takers and boundary pushers. That was something as well where we thought that was a bit of a disparity. We thought that they would consider them to be more risk takers and boundary pushers than in reality. So, describing the policy people. This is the list of potential descriptors. How would you describe the policy people? It very heavily came out in favour of compliance officers, regulatory safeguarders, to a certain extent business partners as well, and regulatory firefighters. So the two words which came out quite a lot were compliance and regulation. In reality, the actual responses from marketers, very similar. Marketers agreed that by and large policy people they consider them to be compliance, regulatory safeguarders, to a certain extent business partners, regulatory firefighters, less so strategic political strategists. So it's in the policy mindset, I think, where you sort of believe that you're in the House of Cards syndrome, but marketers don't necessarily agree with that. Strategic advisors to a certain degree, but less, they don't consider you as much internal police force as you'd thought that you would be. So these were the big ones that we thought: compliance officers, regulatory safeguarders, and there's, I guess, a prevailing sentiment amongst the marketing community that that's how policy people are perceived. Regulatory firefighters as well. When we discussed this and we looked through the results internally as a team, we thought that this was something which was a matter of concern and something that we'd like to be able to chart going forward. If the two functions are to work seamlessly, symbiotically, in the words of David Coleman, going forward, then it's our hypothesis that these two functions need to be working closer together and be seeing each other as business partners. Marketers need to be considering policy people as strategic advisors. When we looked at the barriers to cooperation, we could largely segment them into two different areas. One's operational and one's people. And this we got from open-ended questions. So we heard it at the very beginning in terms of the video, and I think we sort of lumped them together in these two areas. So operationally, a lack of C-suite alignment. There was sentiment from quite a lot of respondents that CMOs and global heads of public affairs were not necessarily interacting at the highest executive levels of the organisation, and naturally, therefore, that was not filtering down in terms of separate reporting lines. Also, a lack of shared goals and KPIs, which we heard from a number of the respondents to the video. There's also a people, an HR component of this, which I guess resonates intuitively with us. The Venus and Mars syndrome, as one respondent put it. There's a difference in language that we use. There's a difference in mindset. And some marketers provocatively indicated that they felt that there was a lack of willingness to change practices amongst policy people. And if we're looking to rectify that, or rectify perhaps some of the functional or operational elements which come out here, we therefore asked policy people, how they reported within their own companies. Now, the 47 policy people who responded to this, it became very apparent to us, and it was of interest to the team as well, that there was almost as many models for reporting as there are respondents. There is just no one-size-fits-all to this. And we know that the US companies, European companies, Asian companies have very different approaches to this across different sectors as well. So I think it was only one respondent said that policy reports into marketing. Relatively few into legal, quite a few into the board directly, corporate communications, and then other was the biggest response. Legal and business, CAO, I'd never heard of a CAO before, that's a Chief Administrative Officer. Corporate affairs, global management, local board, global policy management, regulatory affairs, CFO. And I guess that reflects as well the fact that there were a lot of people at regional level or local level who were responding to this as well. Now, 3 provocative statements, and I'm going to ask whether you agree with this particular statement. This came from one marketer who said it'll be prudent that policy teams have a cross-functional report into the marketing head. This will ensure better understanding of the marketing goals, prevalent marketing conditions, and most importantly, evolving consumer behaviours. Can I see a show of hands from policy and marketing people alike? Who would agree with this statement?
Provided that it works in the other way as well.
Well, so you'd have marketing, okay. Okay.
Two-way street.
Maybe this is something we can pick up afterwards. This was a respondent in policy. And I'm going to ask you if you agree with this. So the biggest barrier to collaboration, high turnover of colleagues in marketing, we know that to be a fact, is that there's a greater churn in marketing than in PA. Organisational structures, different languages, different KPIs, short-term goals, and the policy team being seen as a barrier to creativity and innovation. Are those the biggest challenges? Does that resonate with people? And finally, another respondent in marketing, and this I thought was going to be possibly rather contentious. Policy teams have been working the same way for the last century. They haven't caught up. They should play a bigger role in terms of what we do in relation to data privacy, responsible marketing, purpose. Our policy team is internally focused to minimise corruption and compliance scandals and nothing else. Does that resonate with anyone? Okay. That said, there was an overwhelming sentiment from policy people that they can make their case more compelling to marketing. Areas where marketers want to see more collaboration, we asked you. Marketers are asking for your help as policy people in terms of corporate reputation and responsible marketing, but also, importantly, data collection and privacy, brand safety, risk management, company purpose, building stakeholder trust, and importantly, to Stephen's point as well, brand purpose. 51% of marketing people are asking for policy input on these issues. Then we asked policy people the same question. Where do you think there's going to be scope for greater cross-functional collaboration? And there's a little bit of a disconnect in some areas here. They agreed, policy people agree, that they want to be working closely on corporate reputation and responsible marketing. I think for a lot of us that'll be intuitive. But here, the gap on the right-hand side between the big red, data collection and privacy, and what policy people were saying in dark there. The big red being where marketers are looking for help, and the big black being where you think you can provide help to marketers, is possibly the biggest window of opportunity. There is a gap in expectation in terms of marketers asking for more help on data collection and privacy, on brand safety issues, on risk management, on company purpose, building stakeholder trust, and brand purpose as well. So that, it seems to be, I think, it's possibly the biggest learning from the research results, is that there's an opportunity for public affairs people to deliver greater added value to the marketing function in those areas. Brand safety, data collection and privacy. And interestingly as well, building on what Stephen said at the very beginning, 57% of marketers would like to collaborate more with policy people on company purpose. And my guess is that's relatively new. Also, 51% want to collaborate more on brand purpose. Okay? And this kind of summed up, I think, a lot of the sentiment that we gleaned from reading through the report and a lot of the open answers. Policy teams have an opportunity to transform their mindsets from risk mitigation to opportunity seizing. Their knowledge must be exploited, aiming to give the company and brand a competitive edge. Okay? Does that comment there resonate with people?
Yeah.
Okay. The things that we took out of this were better alignment on targets, reporting and KPIs would be something that would be useful. Share strategic insights. We're convinced, working with marketing people, that very often, to Stefan's point at the very beginning, the market research that marketers conduct is very much focused on the bilateral relationship between consumer and brand, without taking into account all of those forces which can ultimately, very quickly, shape a consumer's view of a brand. And it's those policy insights that we feel need to be brought into company decision making. Work together to execute company purpose. This is something which is increasingly coming out. Create a program for policy education. Don't hope for change, but take charge.